Hello Wildflowers, and welcome back to the Rambling Rose. In this episode, I thought you might like to have a peek behind the scenes of two very different cottage gardens and see just what it takes to make them flourish and feel really enchanted. I'll share 20 ways to love your garden this summer, and I'll take you into town to meet a dear friend for a little cottage garden working bee. Hi Chris! But first, let's get to work in my own garden. Harvesting crops and planting new ones when the season ends is the first way to love your garden, and so I'm pulling out the last of the broad beans. Even in midsummer, there are still a few yummy beans left on these bushes, so I'll pick out the best ones and save them for my favourite recipes. I love to have them smashed on toast or as a filling for ravioli. Next is composting, or in my case, letting the chickens have a scratch around first before throwing all this green matter on the compost pile. Broad beans are excellent nitrogen fixers and will break down quickly, adding nutrients to the soil. Isn't the cycle of life in a garden just a magical thing? There's always plenty of pruning and trimming to do in a cottage garden, and although it hurts me a little to chop away at these daisies, a good haircut will help them stay in shape and keep flowering long into autumn. Look out, Noah, it's raining daisies!
Just tell me I belong. That I'm the lucky one. I'm your chosen one.
Another essential task in a cottage garden is to keep an eye out for invasive herbs like this fennel. Again, I'll save it for a recipe and put the rest on the compost pile. But don't you worry, it will surely spring back again. You really have to admire this herb for its relentless optimism. It sure does want to be a part of my moon garden, and I know I will see it again next year. Before it gets too hot, let's hop on our bike and ride over to another Green Witch's cottage and see what he's up to today. There's something so heartwarming about living in a small country town where everyone knows your name, and I feel so grateful to have found a kindred spirit in my mate Chris. Having a friend who is as passionate about plants as I am has been such an inspiration to me, and I don't think you could go 2 feet in my garden without passing at least one plant that he has raised from seed. A passerby actually caught us sniffing this buddleia repeatedly and discussing the fragrance in detail and all the childhood memories it brought up for us. Yes, we are kooky little garden fairies and wouldn't have it any other way. Chris just so happens to have his own channel called Gardening New Earth, which I will link below, and in his latest episode made these awesome fertilisers for me as a gift. Yay! The stinkiest gifts ever! Transplanting seedlings is number 5 on my list of ways to love your cottage garden this summer. And here we're going to move some ashwagandha and tulsi seedlings that have sprouted up all over the place and settle them into a new position amongst the sunflowers in Chris's sun garden. For this episode, I was inspired by the quote, "As I work on the garden works on me." And out here, with our hands in the soil, the scent of lilac on the air, and the sun on our skin, I can surely feel the garden working its magic on us. And I feel like what we're doing isn't work at all, it's simply love. Next up, there's the task of staking and trellising plants like sunflowers and tomatoes, and climbers like beans, pumpkin and cucumber, to give them some support as they jostle for space and reach towards the sunshine. Doing a great job there, Chris!
Hands that are gentle, working and able, feet in the wine press, build up a township, opals and diamonds, beauty for ashes, silk in the sunshine.
Gathering herbs is one of my favourite ways to love my garden, and it's especially fun to forage around what feels like a mini meadow here, looking for pink and blue cornflowers, wild mint and clary sage to make a delicious herbal tea.
Magic in the ether, marrow in my bones.
With our basket full of beautiful magical flowers, it's time to take a tea break in the shade. But do be careful not to step on any fairies on the way out. On this channel, you know I often say that the garden is a metaphor for life. And this summer, it is reminding me that gardening, just like life itself, is about the journey, not the destination. A well-loved garden is a love affair, an ever-changing, sometimes surprising, and sometimes devastating relationship. There is no one perfect day when everything is just right. Flowers bloom and fade at different times, their moment in the sun so brief and glorious, each taking their turn to dazzle us with beauty before fading and returning to the earth. Some plants take months, even years to reach the peak of their life cycle, and then, like a shooting star, it's all over in the blink of an eye.
Magic in the ether, marrow in my bones.
I guess what the garden has taught me is that you need to dive fully into the beauty of life, experiencing it with all your senses and all your heart, and then be prepared to let it go gracefully when the season turns. Number 8 on my list is chopping and dropping. You'll hear gardeners use this phrase often, but chop and drop isn't just a lazy way of clearing out a faded crop. All of this chopped up green matter will compost down right where it lands, enriching the soil for another season of abundance. Next up is saving seeds, because there's no such thing as too many plants, right? It never ceases to amaze me what wonders can grow from a tiny, rather plain little brown seed. And the best part about doing this as part of our working bee is that we had a little seed swapping party at the end of the day. Back in my own cottage garden, it's time to deadhead the hydrangeas. It kind of breaks my heart every time I do this because they are just so beautiful, but I know, like many flowers, they can handle tough love and will produce masses of blooms if I just keep cutting them as soon as they turn brown. I had a lush winter garden here in the front yard with herbs and vegetables that thrive in the shade. But now at Midsummer, the parsley has completely taken over and everything else has bolted and gone to seed. So it's time to prepare this bed for a new crop, and I'll use the chop and drop method that we learnt over at Chris's. Letting all this goodness rot down over the summer before turning over the soil and planting new seeds in autumn. What do you think I should plant in this shady spot next? I had placed a whole bunch of cabbage moth decoys in this garden bed, but I have to say they were more decorative than functional, as I often came out here to see moths perched happily upon them, looking rather confident and unfazed. Next, let's work on improving the soil in my vegetable garden, adding in a vital nutrient, potassium, with the wood ash that Chris gave me. Potassium regulates plants' water balance, making their cells and tissues all firm and juicy. It also plays a role in creating sugars and starches, which leads to plump, sweet and healthy produce. It's simply ash collected from a bonfire, making sure, of course, that no chemicals or synthetic materials are thrown into that fire. Number 13 is making your own green fertiliser. And I'm a very lucky girl because Chris has done this step for me in his latest episode.
When you're lost and no one's there, and you wonder who even cares.
The garden absolutely loves this stuff, but boy does it smell awful. And after a whole day of gardening, I kinda do too.
Can fly away from here. We can stay close, my dear.
Of course, there's plenty of mowing to do in summer, and I'm so glad I mastered this line trimmer to tidy up the edges of my rose goddess garden. Look out, little butterflies!
Together we can go slow. Why don't you leave it all to me? I know how hard it all can be. I'm here to hold your hand through this.
As the garden grows, there will naturally be gaps which you will want to fill with certain colours and textures. So I'm planting the raspberry buddleia here, where she will attract beautiful butterflies, and maybe a fairy or two. Have I mentioned weeding yet? Because this is an endless labour of love that keeps every cottage gardener busy, busy, busy. Number 17 is mulching, to keep the weeds out and the moisture in on hot summer days. A bit more of that endless weeding in the fairy garden, and then we can spread a thick layer over the soil to keep everyone happy.
We can fly away from here. We can stay close, my dear. Swept up and away from all our fears. How are we supposed to know on our own? Together we can go slow.
Another way to love your garden this summer is to redecorate, moving plants around as needed, making sure everyone has enough space to shine, extending beds and moving out the edges, because a cottage witch is forever making space for new flowers. As evening falls, casting long, cool shadows across the garden, and my body is weary from a hard day's work, it's watering time. Now I get to wander around in quiet contemplation, admiring each and every plant, feeling like this garden is my canvas, and the flowers are brushstrokes of colour. I so hope you've enjoyed this episode, dear Wildflowers. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me all about your garden and what it has taught you over the years. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're loving my content, and be sure to head over to watch the latest episode of Gardening New Earth. I certainly hope I haven't discouraged anyone by showing all the hard work involved, but as I mentioned before, gardening doesn't feel at all like work. The hours fly by, and it just feels like loving. I get so much more back than I could ever put in, so I think this is going to be a beautiful lifelong romance, and I hope it is for you too. Blessed be, sweet souls, and I'll see you again next time, somewhere in the fairy garden among the butterflies and bees.